The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what waited for them in the darkness between worlds. In the year 2157, they finally got their answer. Commander Kira Park stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, humanity's first faster-than-light starship. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. At 34 years old, she had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. Behind her stood her crew. Lieutenant Tae Kim, the ship's engineer, checked his tablet one more time. Dr. Hana Lee, their xenobiologist, pressed her face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. Before them floated Station Orbis. It was the largest structure any human had ever seen. The space station stretched across thousands of kilometers, a massive ring of metal and light that housed millions of alien beings. This was the heart of the Galactic Coalition, a government that controlled over 200 star systems. Humanity was about to knock on their door. Docking request approved, the communications officer announced. They're expecting us. Kira took a deep breath. Then let's not keep them waiting. The Horizon slid into one of the station's many docking bays. As the airlock hissed open, Kira led her small delegation into the unknown. The corridor beyond was wide enough for creatures of any size. The walls glowed with soft blue light. Strange smells filled the air, some sweet, some sharp, all completely alien. A guide was waiting for them. It was a creature unlike anything from Earth. Its body was made of living crystal, tall and thin, with facets that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. It had no face that Kira could recognize, but somehow she knew it was looking at her. "Welcome to Station Orbis," the crystal being said. Its voice came from a small device attached to its chest, translating its thoughts into English. "I am called Veth. I will take you to the council chamber." Kira nodded. "Thank you. We're honored to be here." They walked through corridors filled with wonders. Creatures of every shape and size moved around them. Some floated through the air. Others crawled along the walls. A few seemed to exist as nothing more than clouds of colored gas. Tae Kim's eyes were wide. Hana Lee was quietly recording everything with a small device hidden in her palm. The council chamber was a massive room at the center of the station. Hundreds of alien delegates sat in tiered seats that curved around a central platform. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars beyond. Kira had never felt so small in her entire life. "The human delegation will approach," a booming voice announced. Kira walked forward with her team. She could feel thousands of alien eyes watching her every move. Some of those eyes were curious. Others seemed bored. A few held expressions she could not read at all. She stopped at the center of the platform and waited. A large creature descended from the highest tier. It was a Velarath, like their guide Veth, but much larger. Its crystal body was deep purple, shot through with veins of gold. This was High Chancellor Morath, the leader of the Galactic Coalition. "Humans," the Chancellor said. Its voice was cold and flat. "You have traveled far to reach us. Your species is young. Your technology is primitive. Your military fleet is laughably small. Tell us why the Coalition should care about your existence." Kira had prepared for this question. She had memorized speeches about human culture, human science, human dreams, but standing here, under the weight of all those alien stares, she decided to speak from her heart instead. "We're here because we believe in connection," she said. "We've spent our entire history reaching out. Reaching across oceans. Reaching across continents. Reaching for the stars. We don't know what we can offer the Coalition yet, but we know we want to try." She stepped forward and raised her hand, palm open, fingers spread. "On Earth, this is how we greet new friends. We offer our hand. It means we come in peace. It means we want to work together." She reached toward High Chancellor Morath. What happened next would change the course of galactic history. The Chancellor recoiled. Its massive crystal body jerked backwards so violently that it nearly fell. A sound escaped from its translator, something between a gasp and a scream. All around the chamber, aliens began to react. Some pressed themselves against the walls, others fled toward the exits. A group of slug-like creatures left trails of slime as they rushed away in panic. Kira froze. her hand still extended. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong? Tae-Kim grabbed her arm and pulled it down. Put it away, he hissed. Whatever you did, stop doing it. I didn't do anything. I just offered to shake hands. Dr. Hana Lee was staring at the chaos around them with scientific fascination. Kira, she said slowly, I think that's exactly the problem. And Ines was. The Chancellor had recovered slightly. It stood at a safe distance, its crystal body flickering with colors that might have been fear or anger, or both. What? It demanded. Is that thing at the end of your arm? Kira looked down at her hand. It was just a hand. 5 fingers. 1 palm. Nothing special. She had never thought about it before. It was just part of her body. As natural as breathing. It's my hand, she said. All humans have them. A ripple of horror passed through the chamber. Delegates who had started to calm down began panicking again. Kira heard snippets of translated conversations from all around her. Both of them have those things. The third one too. Look. Weapons. They must be weapons. Nobody said they had weapons. What kind of species carries weapons attached to their bodies? Kira wanted to explain that hands were not weapons. But even as she thought it, she knew it was not entirely true. Hands could become fists. Fists could break bones. She had learned that in her combat training years ago. The Chancellor raised one of its crystalline appendages, and silence fell across the chamber. This meeting is suspended, it announced. The human delegation will be confined to quarters until we determine the level of threat they represent. Threat? Kira said. We came here in peace. We came here with open hands. Yes, the Chancellor replied. That is precisely what concerns us. Guards surrounded the human delegation and led them away. As they walked back through the corridors of Station Orbis, Kira noticed that every alien they passed moved aside to let them through. They were not showing respect. They were keeping their distance. Tae-Kim leaned close to her ear. What just happened? Kira looked down at her hands. She turned them over, studying the lines on her palms, the creases of her knuckles, the short nails at the end of each finger. They were just hands. She had used them her whole life without thinking. I don't know, she admitted. But I think we just scared the entire galaxy by waving, hello. In her quarters that night, Kira sat alone and stared at her own reflection. She held up her hands and watched them move. She made a fist. She spread her fingers. She touched her fingertips together one by one. Whatever the aliens saw when they looked at human hands, it terrified them more than bombs or battleships. Kira needed to understand why. Because somewhere in that fear, she suspected, lay the key to humanity's place in the stars. 3 months had passed since the disaster at the council chamber. The human delegation was no longer confined to quarters, but they were not welcome either. They existed in a strange middle space, allowed to walk the corridors of Station Orbis, but always watched, always avoided, always alone. Dr. Hana Lee spent most of her time in the station's great library, studying everything she could find about the Coalition's member species. She was trying to understand what made humans so frightening. The answer, she knew, had something to do with their hands, but the details escaped her. One morning, she received an unexpected message. A Velorath named Byung wanted to meet with her. He claimed to have information that would help her understand. Hana found Byung waiting in a small room near the library. He was smaller than most Velorath she had seen. His crystal body a pale blue color that seemed almost fragile. When she entered, he flinched slightly at the sight of her hands, but he did not run away. Thank you for meeting me, he said through his translator. Thank you for reaching out, Hana replied. She kept her hands folded in her lap, trying to make them less visible. You said you could help me understand why everyone is so afraid of us. Byung made a sound that might have been a sigh. I have spent the last 3 months studying your species. I have watched recordings of humans on Earth. I have read your history. I have forced myself to look at your hands until the fear became manageable. He paused. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Why? Hana asked softly. They're just hands. No, Byung said. They are not just anything. Come with me. I have been given permission to show you something that might help you understand. Understand. He led her through winding corridors to a part of the station she had never seen before. The walls here were darker, the lights dimmer. They stopped before a massive door marked with symbols Hana could not read. This is the archive of extinct species, Byung explained. A record of every civilization that has risen and fallen in our galaxy. There are over 1 million entries. The door opened, and they stepped inside. The archive was a vast circular room filled with floating holographic displays. Each display showed images of a different species, along with data about their biology, their culture, their achievements, and their end. Hana walked among the ghosts of 1 million dead civilizations and felt the weight of cosmic history pressing down on her shoulders. Let me show you something, Byung said. He gestured, and several displays floated toward them. The first showed a creature covered in thick armor plates, with massive claws at the end of each limb. The Kronith, Byung said. They were warriors. Their claws could cut through starship hulls. For 3,000 years, they conquered everything they touched. What happened to them? A disease attacked their nervous systems. Their claws became paralyzed. Without their weapons, they could not hunt, could not fight, could not survive. They went extinct in less than a century. He gestured again, and a new display appeared. This one showed creatures with long, flexible tentacles. The writhing ones. They were builders. Their tentacles could manipulate objects with incredible precision. They constructed wonders that still stand today. And they also went extinct? A shift in their planet's gravity made their tentacles too heavy to lift. They starved, surrounded by food they could not reach. Display after display floated past. Creatures with pincers, with hooks, with suction cups, with magnetic appendages. Each species had evolved a specialized tool for survival, and each species had died when that tool failed them. Do you see the pattern? Byung asked. Hana nodded slowly. They were all specialists. They evolved to do one thing very well. But when conditions changed, they couldn't adapt. Exactly. Byung's crystal body flickered with colors Hana was beginning to recognize as approval. Now let me show you why your species terrifies us. He pulled up a display of human beings. Images of hands filled the air around them. Hands holding tools. Hands typing on keyboards. Hands painting pictures. Hands throwing punches. Hands cradling babies. Hands firing weapons. Your hands do everything, Byung said. The same appendage that writes your poetry also strangles your enemies. The same fingers that perform delicate surgery also pull triggers. You create and destroy, with identical anatomy. He zoomed in on a single human hand. Look at this, 5 flexible digits, opposable thumb, millions of nerve endings. You can feel the difference between silk and sandpaper. You can thread a needle or crush a skull. You can pick a lock or build a house or perform a heart transplant or choke the life out of another being. His voice trembled slightly. Every species in this archive evolved limitations. Claws cannot heal. Tentacles cannot punch. Pincers cannot comfort a crying child. But your hands have no limitations. They can do anything. They can become anything. Hana looked down at her own hands. She had never thought about them this way before. They were just part of her body. As normal and unremarkable as her eyes or her feet. There's something else, Byung said. He called up a specific file. 3 years ago, a human ship crashed on an uncharted moon. 3 survivors, no tools, no supplies, no hope of rescue. Hana recognized the incident. The lunar crash of 2154. Sergeant Jin Woo and his crew. They survived for 47 days, Byung continued. Watch what they did. The holographic display showed grainy footage recovered from the survivors' helmet cameras. Hana watched as 3 humans, stranded on a barren rock with nothing but the wreckage of their ship, fought to stay alive. She watched Jin Woo build a shelter from twisted metal, bending the pieces into shape with his bare hands. She watched him create tools from debris, sharpening rocks and tying them to sticks. She watched his crewmate, a woman named Bo Young, perform surgery on herself, using a piece of broken glass as a scalpel. She watched the third survivor, a man named Jae Min, build a signal mirror from polished metal and use it to flash messages at passing ships. 47 days, no resources, just 3 humans and their hands. The Kronith would have died on that moon, Byung said quietly. The writhing ones would have died. Every species in this archive would have died. But your people survived. They adapted. They improvised. They used their hands to do things those hands were never designed to do. He turned to face Hana directly. She could see her reflection in his crystal body, distorted and strange. This is why we fear you. Not your weapons, not your ships, your hands. Because your hands can become any weapon. Your hands can solve any problem. Your hands make you the most adaptable, most unpredictable, most dangerous species we have ever encountered. Hana sat in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000,000 extinct civilizations. She understood now. Human hands were not just tools. They were symbols of everything humanity was. Creative, adaptable, determined, and utterly relentless. We don't have to be dangerous, she said finally. We can use our hands for peace. Can you? Byung asked. Can you promise that? Can you guarantee that the same hands that reach out in friendship will never close into fists? Hana wanted to say yes. She wanted to promise that humanity would always choose peace over war, creation over destruction, open palms over clenched fists, but she was a scientist. She dealt in truth. No, she admitted. I can't promise that. We're capable of terrible things, but we're also capable of wonderful things. Our hands can build or destroy. The choice is ours. Byung was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. That choice, he said, is exactly what frightens us. Because we have no idea which one you will make. Hana left the archive with a heavy heart and a new understanding. The galaxy feared humanity not because humans were monsters, but because humans could become anything. The same hands that could shake in friendship could also wrap around a throat. Humanity would have to prove itself. Not with weapons or wealth or technology. With choices. With actions. With the things their hands decided to do. It would not be easy, but Hana believed it was possible. She looked down at her hands one more time. We'll show them, she whispered to herself. We'll show them what we can really do. The fear of human hands spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within 6 months of first contact, stories about the strange creatures from Earth had reached every corner of Coalition space. Most of these stories were exaggerated. Some were completely false. But all of them agreed on one thing. Human hands were dangerous beyond measure. Trade negotiations with Earth collapsed. 3 species formally requested that humanity be quarantined to their home system. A faction within the coalition began pushing for something more permanent. They called themselves the Preservation Alliance, and they believed the only safe human was a dead human. On Earth, leaders debated how to respond. Some wanted to show strength. Others wanted to hide and hope the galaxy forgot about them. In the end, they chose a different path. They would send a delegation to address the Coalition Council directly, not to threaten, not to beg, to demonstrate. Admiral Sung Park was chosen to lead the mission. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and a face carved by decades of military service. Scars covered his arms and chest, souvenirs from battles he rarely spoke about. But his eyes were calm, and his voice was steady. And when he spoke, people listened. He brought 2 others with him. Captain Dae-yoon was a combat specialist, a quiet man who moved like water and could disassemble any weapon in existence. Dr. Mina Cho was a surgeon, famous across Earth for operations that other doctors said were impossible. Together, the 3 of them traveled to Station Orbis to face the beings who wanted humanity destroyed. The council chamber was more crowded than it had been during first contact. Word had spread that the humans were coming, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Delegates filled every seat. Observers packed the viewing galleries. Security forces lined the walls, their weapons ready. Admiral Sung walked to the center of the platform with his team behind him. He looked up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at him. Some showed fear. Others showed hatred. A few showed something that might have been curiosity. "Thank you for allowing us to speak," he said. His voice was calm and clear. "I know many of you are afraid of us. I know some of you want us dead. I am not here to argue with your fears. I am here to show you what human hands really are." He nodded to Captain Day, who stepped forward. Day carried a metal case in his hands. He set it down on the platform and opened it to reveal a disassembled plasma rifle. Its parts scattered across velvet lining. Next to the parts lay a simple toolkit. "This weapon is Coalition standard issue," Admiral Sung explained. "It has 47 components. The fastest Coalition soldier can assemble it in 8 minutes." Day picked up a blindfold and tied it around his eyes. The chamber fell silent. Then his hands began to move. They moved like living things, independent of the rest of his body. His fingers found each component by touch alone. They sorted the pieces, organized them, began fitting them together. There was no hesitation, no fumbling. His hands knew exactly what to do. In 1 minute and 43 seconds, the rifle was complete. Day removed the blindfold and held up the weapon for everyone to see. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Admiral Sung let it fade before speaking again. "Our hands learn," he said. "They remember. Once they have done something, they can do it again without thought. Faster. Better. In darkness or light. In calm or chaos. Our hands do not forget." He nodded to Dr. Mina, who stepped forward next. A medical station had been prepared at the side of the platform. Lying on the table was a Mundari, one of the slug-like creatures common throughout the Coalition. This Mundari had volunteered for what came next, though Sung could see the fear glistening in its eye stalks. "This is Elder Gom," Admiral Sung said. "For 12 years, a tumor has grown near his respiratory membrane. Coalition doctors have declared it inoperable. They say removing it would kill him. Elder Gom has accepted that he will die slowly, drowning in his own fluids." Dr. Mina approached the table. She wore no surgical suit. She carried no advanced equipment. In her hands were simple tools: a scalpel, forceps, sutures, and a small cauterizing device. "Dr. Cho will now attempt the surgery that your doctors say is impossible," Admiral Sung announced. "She will use nothing but her hands and basic instruments. If she fails, Elder Gom will die. He has accepted this risk." The chamber was utterly silent as Mina began her work. Her hands moved with precision that made Day's demonstration look clumsy. She cut through tissue layers thinner than paper. She navigated around blood vessels smaller than human hair. Her fingers seemed to feel things that eyes could not see, sensing the tumor's edges through touch alone. For 3 hours, the galaxy watched a human perform miracles with her hands. When she finished, she stepped back from the table. Elder Gom's respiratory membrane was clean. The tumor was gone. A shallow wound remained where she had worked, already sealed with perfect sutures. Elder Gom took his first free breath in over a decade. The sound was wet and ragged, but it was strong. Tears leaked from his eye stalks as he realized he was going to live. The murmur that swept through the chamber this time was different. It was not fear. It was something closer to awe. "Our hands heal," Admiral Sung said quietly. "They repair what is broken. They save what is dying. The same fingers that can assemble weapons can also mend flesh and give life back to the dying." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he stepped forward himself and began to remove his uniform jacket. Beneath the jacket, his torso was a map of violence. Scars crisscrossed his skin like roads through a war-torn country. Some were thin and white with age. Others were thick and purple, still healing after many years. The delegates closest to the platform gasped at the sight. 20 years ago, I was captured by enemies of Earth," Admiral Sung said. "I was held prisoner for 11 months. I had no weapons, no allies, no hope of rescue. I was chained in a cell smaller than this platform, beaten every day, starved every night. He held up his hands. They were large and rough, covered in small scars of their own. These hands freed me. I picked the lock on my chains with my fingernails. It took me 16 days. The nail on my right thumb never grew back properly. He pointed to a scar on his abdomen. My captors put a tracking device inside my body. I could not escape while it remained. So I used a piece of broken glass to cut into my own flesh. I found the device with my fingers and pulled it out. Then I stitched the wound closed with thread from my clothing. A sound of horror rippled through the chamber. Admiral Sung ignored it. I built a radio from scraps I found in garbage. I signaled for rescue. When help was still days away, and a guard discovered my escape attempt, I killed him with these hands. I wrapped them around his throat and squeezed until he stopped moving. He looked down at his palms. These hands have done terrible things. They have taken lives. They have caused pain. I will not pretend otherwise. But these same hands have also saved lives. They have built homes. They have held my children when they were afraid. They have wiped tears from my wife's cheeks. He raised his eyes to meet the council's stare. You are right to respect our hands. They are powerful beyond anything you have seen before. But you are wrong to fear them. Because our hands are not weapons. They are tools, and like any tool, they can be used for good or evil. The choice is ours. He stepped forward, toward High Chancellor Morath, who had retreated to the back of the chamber during the demonstrations. I know you are afraid, Admiral Sung said. I understand. But fear is a poor foundation for peace. Let me show you what our hands can do when they choose friendship over war. He extended his hand, palm open, fingers spread. The same gesture that had caused panic 6 months earlier. The chamber held its breath. High Chancellor Morath stared at the offered hand for a long moment. The crystal facets of its body flickered with colors Sung could not interpret. Fear, perhaps, or doubt, or something else entirely. Then, slowly, the Chancellor reached out with one of its own appendages. The two limbs touched. Human skin against alien crystal. Warm flesh against cold mineral. Two species, separated by millions of years of evolution, connected by a single gesture. I accept your hand, the Chancellor said. I accept your friendship. I accept the risk that comes with both. The chamber erupted in sound. Some delegates cheered. Others wept. A few fled in continued terror. But something had changed. Something fundamental. Humanity had taken its first real step into the galactic community, not with weapons or wealth, with open hands and honest words. As Admiral Sung withdrew his hand, he felt the weight of history settling onto his shoulders. This was just the beginning. Humanity would have to prove itself again and again, for years or centuries to come, but they had been given a chance. And humans, as the galaxy was beginning to learn, were very good at making the most of their chances. 5 years had passed since Admiral Sung shook hands with the High Chancellor. In that time, humanity had become a small but respected member of the Galactic Coalition. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges began. Human doctors traveled to distant worlds to teach their surgical techniques. Human engineers helped repair stations that had been failing for centuries. Slowly, fear transformed into something else. Curiosity, respect, even friendship. Then the harvesters came. Nobody knew where they came from. The first reports described massive ships appearing at the edge of Coalition space, darker than the void between stars. They moved without warning, without communication, without mercy. Their only purpose was consumption. They ate worlds. They ate stations. They ate entire civilizations and converted them into raw materials for more ships. The Coalition had faced threats before. They had fought wars and won them. But the harvesters were different. They could not be reasoned with, because they did not think. They could not be defeated because they adapted to every weapon. When the Coalition fleet engaged them at the Battle of Outer Reach, 12,000 warships were destroyed in less than 4 hours. The harvesters lost nothing. Panic spread through coalition space. Species that had lived in peace for millennia began fighting each other for evacuation routes. The great alliance that had lasted for thousands of years started to crack. The harvesters chose their next target, Nexus Prime. It was one of the most important worlds in the coalition. A hub planet that housed 12 billion beings from over 100 different species. Evacuation was impossible. There was not enough time. The coalition military had nothing left to send. Nexus Prime was going to die. Captain Kira Park, formerly commander of the USS Horizon, stood on the bridge of her new ship. The Indomitable. She had earned her promotion through years of service, building bridges between humans and aliens, proving again and again that human hands could create as well as destroy. Now she faced the hardest decision of her life. The Coalition Admiral spoke to her through the communications screen. His face was grave. Captain Park, I am ordering all ships to withdraw. Nexus Prime cannot be saved. We must preserve our remaining forces for the defense of the core worlds. Kira looked at the sensor data. The Harvester fleet was massive. Hundreds of ships that dwarfed anything the Coalition possessed. They would reach Nexus Prime in 6 hours. 12 billion people would be dead by morning. No, she said. The Admiral blinked. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not leaving. Those are people down there. 12 billion of them. I won't abandon them. Captain, this is not a request. This is an order. What can one ship possibly do against the harvesters? Kira turned to face her crew. Lieutenant Tae Kim was at the engineering station, his fingers dancing across his console. Dr. Hana Lee stood near the medical bay, her face pale but determined. Dr. Mina Cho had joined them as the ship's chief medical officer. Captain Dae Yoon had retired from combat but had volunteered for this mission anyway. Behind them stood 2,000 human volunteers. Engineers, doctors, soldiers, civilians. Every human on Station Orbis had asked to come. These were the ones Kira had chosen. We're not bringing our fleet, Kira told the Admiral. We're bringing our hands. She cut the communication before he could respond. The Indomitable descended through the atmosphere of Nexus Prime as chaos erupted below. Cities burned. Crowds stampeded. Emergency sirens screamed across every frequency. Kira landed her ship in the central plaza of the capital city and opened the cargo doors. 2,000 humans poured out into an alien world that was waiting to die. Listen up, Kira shouted over the noise. The harvesters will be here in 5 hours. Coalition weapons don't work against them. Coalition tactics don't work against them. So we're not going to use coalition weapons or tactics. We're going to improvise. She pointed to Tae Kim. Engineering teams, you're with Kim. The harvesters are immune to energy weapons. So we're going to build kinetic weapons instead. Railguns. Mass drivers. Anything that throws metal really fast. Find scrap. Find wreckage. Build me something that can punch holes in those things. Tae nodded and sprinted away with 300 engineers behind him. Kira pointed to Hana Lee. Science teams, you're with Lee. The harvesters repair themselves using nanites. We need something that stops those nanites. A virus. An acid. Anything. You have 4 hours to invent it. Hana grabbed her medical kit and ran toward the nearest research facility. 200 scientists following in her wake. Combat teams, you're with Day. The harvesters communicate on specific frequencies. We're going to stay silent. Hand signals only. Learn them. Use them. Don't let those machines know where we are. Day began teaching human sign language to soldiers who had never used it before. Medical teams, you're with Dr. Cho. Set up field hospitals, prepare for mass casualties, and figure out how to treat injuries we've never seen before. Because we're going to be treating aliens, not humans. Mina nodded and started organizing her doctors. Kira looked at the remaining volunteers. Civilians, teachers, artists, people with no military training at all. Everyone else, you're with me. We're going to help with evacuation. We're going to carry the wounded. We're going to do whatever needs doing, with whatever we have available. Any questions? There were no questions. There was no time for questions. The humans scattered across Nexus Prime and began to work. The next 5 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Kim and his engineers built 17 railguns from the wreckage of crashed shuttles. They mounted them on rooftops and aimed them at the sky. Hana Lee and her scientists created a corrosive foam that dissolved harvester nanites on contact. They mixed it in bathtubs and stored it in fire extinguishers. Dae Yoon trained 3,000 alien volunteers in hand signal communication in less than 2 hours. And when the harvesters arrived, the humans were ready. The first wave of harvester drones descended on the capital city, expecting easy prey. They found bullets instead. Tae's railguns tore through their armor like paper. Machines that had survived plasma cannons and nuclear weapons fell to scrap metal launched at hypersonic speeds. The drones adapted. They learned to dodge. They changed their armor composition. But the humans adapted faster. They changed their firing patterns. They used decoys. They fought in ways no species had ever fought before. Because no species had ever been forced to improvise like this. The ground battle was worse. Harvester walkers stomped through the streets, cutting down anything that moved. Coalition soldiers tried to fight back, and died by the thousands. Their weapons were useless. Their tactics were predictable. The humans fought differently. They attacked from shadows, striking and vanishing before the machines could respond. They used hand signals to coordinate ambushes that came from every direction at once. They sprayed Hana's foam onto the walkers, clogging their repair systems, slowing them down. And when machines got too close, when weapons failed and options ran out, the humans used their hands. Kira watched a young engineer named Jun Ho bring down a harvester drone by climbing onto its back and tearing out its power cables with his bare fingers. She saw a medic named Su Min drag an injured Mundari to safety, while 3 machines fired at her. She witnessed 2 humans working together to disassemble a walker piece by piece, pulling it apart like a puzzle, their hands moving in perfect coordination. 17 days. That was how long the siege lasted. 17 days of constant battle, of sleepless nights, of desperate improvisation. The humans rebuilt defenses faster than the harvesters destroyed them. They invented new weapons in bombed-out laboratories. They performed surgery in the streets. Kira lost count of how many times she should have died. She lost count of how many times someone's hands saved her life. On the 18th day, coalition reinforcements finally arrived. A fleet of 500 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Nexus Prime, ready for a desperate last stand against an unstoppable enemy. What they found instead was silence. The harvesters were retreating. For the first time in their million-year history, the ancient machines were pulling back. Their fleet, which had arrived with hundreds of ships, limped away with less than half that number. The rest were debris, floating in orbit around a world that should have been dead. The Coalition Admiral landed in the central plaza, where a crude banner made from torn fabric hung above the wreckage. 2,000 humans stood beneath it, battered and bloody but still standing. "What happened here?" the Admiral asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kira Park stepped forward. Her uniform was torn. Her hands were burned and bleeding. She had not slept in 4 days, but she was smiling. "We got creative," she said. She held up her hands, showing the Admiral her blistered palms and broken fingernails. "You were right to fear these," she told him. "But not because they destroy. Because they never give up. Because they adapt. Because they can do anything." She turned to look at her people, her beautiful, stubborn, impossible people. "We held this world with nothing but our hands and our will. And we will do it again. Anywhere in this galaxy, whenever we are needed." The Admiral stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something no Coalition officer had ever done to a human before. He bowed. "The Coalition is in your debt," he said. "From this day forward, humanity will never stand alone." Kira nodded. She was too tired to speak. But she held up her hand, palm open, fingers spread. The Admiral reached out and touched it gently. Around them, aliens and humans began to embrace. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. And somewhere in the void of space, the harvesters continued their retreat, fleeing from a species they could not comprehend, fleeing from the terror of the human hand. 50 years had passed since the siege of Nexus Prime. The galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity was no longer a minor species struggling for acceptance. Humans had spread across coalition space like seeds on the wind. They built colonies on 100 worlds. They served on alien starships. They taught in alien universities. They married aliens and raised children who belonged to 2 worlds at once. But humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy was not their technology or their culture. It was their hands. The Human Hand Initiative began as a small program on Station Orbis, just a few classrooms where humans taught aliens how to use their appendages in new ways. Within a decade, it had grown into a galactic movement. Training centers opened on every major world. Millions of aliens enrolled each year, eager to learn the secrets that had allowed 2,000 humans to defeat the unstoppable harvesters. Not every species could match human capability. Many lacked the flexible fingers or the neural pathways needed for fine motor control. But even modest improvements changed everything. Velarath engineers learned to perform repairs that once required expensive machines. Mundari doctors developed new surgical techniques adapted for their tentacles. Species that had spent centuries relying on technology discovered the power of direct physical manipulation. The results were remarkable. Accident rates dropped as beings learned to catch themselves when they stumbled. Poverty decreased as people discovered they could build and repair things themselves. Creativity flourished as artists explored what their bodies could truly do. The fear of human hands did not disappear entirely. Some species still flinched when humans gestured too quickly. Some politicians still warned about the danger of letting humans spread too far. But for most of the galaxy, fear had transformed into something healthier. Respect, admiration, even envy. On the memorial world of Nexus Prime, a massive statue stood in the central plaza. It depicted a human hand, 20 meters tall, carved from white stone. The hand was open, palm facing upward, fingers spread wide. Not a fist, not a weapon, an invitation. Dr. Hana Lee visited the statue on the anniversary of the siege, as she did every year. She was old now, her hair white, and her face lined with wrinkles, but her eyes were still sharp, and her hands were still steady. They had to be. She still performed surgery 3 days a week at the Coalition Medical Center. This year, she was not alone. Her granddaughter walked beside her, a young woman named Sue Lee, who had just graduated from the xenobiology program at New Seoul University. Sue had her grandmother's eyes and her grandfather's stubborn chin. She was brilliant and curious and eager to make her mark on the galaxy. "Tell me about the siege again," Sue said as they approached the statue. Hana smiled. She had told this story 100 times, but she never got tired of it. "We were terrified," she admitted. "All of us. The harvesters were supposed to be unstoppable. The Coalition had given up. Everyone said Nexus Prime was going to die. But you stayed anyway. We stayed because we had to. Because those were people down there, even if they didn't look like us. Because our hands could help, and we couldn't live with ourselves if we didn't try." They reached the base of the statue and looked up at the massive stone hand. "Captain Park led us," Hana continued. "She was incredible. She never stopped moving. Never stopped thinking. Never stopped believing we could win. And Tay, and Mina, and all the others. They worked miracles with nothing but scrap metal and determination. What happened to them all?" Hana's smile turned sad. "Tay died 10 years ago. His heart gave out while he was teaching an engineering class. He was showing his students how to build a water filter from garbage, and he just collapsed. The students finished the filter in his honor. It's still used on 3 colony worlds." She paused to gather herself. "Mina is still alive. She runs the largest hospital in Coalition space. She's trained over 50,000 surgeons, human and alien alike. Her hands might be old, but they're still the steadiest in the galaxy. And Captain Park? Admiral Park now. She commands the Combined Defense Fleet. She's the first human to hold that position. The harvesters haven't attacked Coalition space in 30 years, and everyone says it's because they're still afraid of her." Sue looked at her own hands. She flexed her fingers, watching the tendons move beneath her skin. Grandma, why were they so scared of us? We're not that strong. We're not that fast. We don't have claws or armor or venom. What made our hands so terrifying? Hana had asked herself this question many times over the years. She had studied it scientifically, philosophically, historically. She had interviewed aliens from 100 species, and she had finally found an answer that satisfied her. It wasn't about what our hands could destroy, she said. They had seen destruction before. They had faced species with claws that could tear through starship hulls and beams that could vaporize cities. They knew how to handle destroyers. She took her granddaughter's hand in her own. What scared them was what our hands could become. Every other species in the galaxy evolved specialized limbs. Claws for cutting, tentacles for grasping, pincers for crushing. Their appendages were tools designed for specific purposes. When conditions changed, they couldn't adapt. That's why so many of them went extinct. She squeezed Sue's fingers gently. But our hands have no specific purpose. They can do anything. They can become anything. They can build a house, or break a jaw. They can play music, or fire weapons. They can heal wounds or strangle enemies. The same fingers that create art can tear it apart. She released her granddaughter's hand and gestured at the statue above them. The galaxy had seen 1,000,000 weapons, but they had never seen a species that could improvise like we can. They had never faced beings who could look at a pile of garbage and see tools, or look at a desperate situation and see opportunity. That's what terrified them, not our strength, our potential. Sue considered this for a long moment. So what we're really teaching them isn't how to use their hands. It's how to think like humans. Hana's eyes sparkled with pride. Exactly. The hand initiative isn't about physical technique. It's about mindset. It's about looking at a problem and refusing to accept that it can't be solved. It's about improvisation and adaptation, and the stubborn belief that there's always another way. She looked up at the statue again. That's why I insisted the statue should be an open hand, not a fist. A fist says we're dangerous. An open hand says we're ready to help. We're ready to build. We're ready to reach across any distance and grab whatever challenges the universe throws at us. Sue stepped forward and placed her palm against the base of the statue. The stone was warm from the afternoon sun. What happens now? She asked. The harvesters are gone. The coalition is stronger than ever. Humans are accepted everywhere. Is our work done? Hana laughed softly. Our work is never done. The universe is vast, Sue. There are more challenges waiting for us than we can imagine. New species to meet. New problems to solve. New hands to reach out toward. She joined her granddaughter at the statue's base and placed her own weathered hand against the stone. 50 years ago, this galaxy thought we were monsters. They saw our hands and imagined all the terrible things we could do. They weren't entirely wrong. We are capable of terrible things, but we're also capable of wonderful things. The choice was always ours. She turned to face her granddaughter directly. We chose to heal instead of harm. We chose to build instead of destroy. We chose to open our hands instead of closing them into fists. And because of those choices, the galaxy changed. Sue looked at her grandmother's hands. They were old and scarred, covered in spots and wrinkles. But they were beautiful. They had saved lives. They had taught millions. They had helped reshape an entire civilization. I want to make a difference too, Sue said quietly. Like you did. Like Captain Park and the others. Hana smiled and took her granddaughter's hands in her own. You will, she promised. You have the same hands we all have. The same potential. The same power to choose what you become. She raised Sue's hands up, into the light. The galaxy feared these once. Now they look to them with hope. Not because we're special. Because we showed them what's possible. When you refuse to give up. Above them, the stone hand reached toward the sky, open and welcoming. Around them, the rebuilt city of Nexus Prime hummed with life. Aliens and humans walked together through the streets, their children playing in parks that had once been battlefields. The fear of human hands had become the hope of human hands. And somewhere, in the darkness between stars, the future waited, ready for whatever humanity's hands would build next.